The things that were the most harmful in general were actually things said over the pulpit, whether it was in church, whether it was in Relief Society, or whether it was in general conference. It is the generalizations of people like me who are questioning, who do decide to make a full exit. And these phrases that are used, such as lazy learner, or lost sheep, or apostate, or don't take counsel from non believers like we weren't there before, or these overarching generalizations are really harmful to a lot of us because we have just exited every identity point. We no longer know who we are, and we're trying to pick up those pieces and the narratives that come with that, the assumptions that come with that over the pulpit, and the generalizations, I think were the most harmful, and what made it easier for me to no longer go to church actively is because I would continue to hear those. And while even sometimes I still wanted to be there, I couldn't get myself to do it because I couldn't hear one more negative thing about somebody who might be in the same boat as I.
Hello, Why I Stay family. Welcome to episode 4 of the Listen In series, a new limited series where I bring former members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints onto the podcast so they can help me learn how to be a better listener. I am already just blown away by all of the things that these friends have to teach me. I have been humbled over and over again, and I've been able to really see where I need to change. I hope that by watching me fumble through my questions and my pride and the things that I'm working on, that maybe you might be able to take some of my lessons that I've learned and the questions that I ask and find your friends and your family who have left the church and apply it there. And if you are a member of the Church of Jesus Christ and you are wondering how to have these conversations, I'd love to invite you to look down below and click the link to get my list of 5 questions to ask your loved one who has left the Church of Jesus Christ. And sometimes we just need to know where to begin. So I've got some tips about approaching others that I've learned from these wonderful interviews that I'm doing, and you can find that as a free resource down below in the description. So click that link and grab that resource if it would be helpful to you. I do a scripture, or this one is a conference quote at the beginning of these episodes, and this one's from President Holland in October of 24, his conference talk called I Am He. So thinking about why we don't want to sit down and have these difficult conversations with our loved ones sometimes, for me, I guess, it's just fear of different things. And one of them is bringing more sorrow and pain and difficulty into my own life. But if we're trying to be like Jesus Christ, he took upon himself all of our sorrows and all of our grief, and he was able to bear it without sinking, and I might be able to do that if I involve him in the process. So this is what President Holland says. Jesus was a man of sorrows, the scriptures say. He experienced sadness, fatigue, disappointment, and excruciating loneliness. In these and in all times, Jesus' love faileth not, and neither does his Father's. With such mature love, the kind that exemplifies, empowers, and imparts, ours will not fail either. So I want to help my love not fail, and I know the only way I can do that is by turning it over to God. So we are going to get into another story from a former member, and today we've got with us Tori Smedley. Tori, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for making space for us.
Of course, it is my honor, my privilege. All right, Tori, let us do your rapid fire get to know you questions before we dig in. Are you ready?
Great. Yep, I'm ready.
Tori, how old are you?
I'm 30, just as of a couple days ago. It's been a crisis.
I'm 33, okay? You will make it. It's going to be okay.
We'll make it.
Do you have any nicknames?
Just Tor, Tor.
What state do you live in?
I live in Utah.
What is your favorite food?
My favorite food is white rice. I grew up in a home with authentic Thai food, and so white rice is just like one giant comfort hug.
What is your current hobby?
Anything outside. I love being in the mountains. I love being on a bike, being on skis, anything like that.
Perfect place, Utah for you then, huh?
Truly. That's why I'm still here.
What is a controversial opinion that you have? Like everybody loves Crocs, but you hate them.
I'd say that breakfast is the best meal, would be my controversial opinion.
And what is something about you that is the same now as it was when you were in high school?
Ironically, very little's the same, so I would say the only thing that's probably the same is my hobbies. They've all stayed the same.
Still an outdoor girl at heart, right?
Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you for doing that. And let's just dive right in. My first question that I have for everyone is, what is your background in the church? Did you grow up in the church, convert? Was your family active, not active? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I did grow up in the church. I had a family where we were already kind of nuanced to begin with. My mom was active and my dad was not. We were kind of unique in that. My parents very much just raised us to be, to our core, just good humans. We did end up going to church most of the time with my mom. They also just kind of let us choose what we wanted to do. And I was the kid that embodied everything about the church and was full active. I served a mission. I believed everything. So yeah, that's pretty much the trajectory. It's right around like 24, 25 that things started to change for me.
Thank you. Just out of curiosity, where did you serve your mission?
I served in Arizona.
Yeah, I'm from Arizona. Where in
Okay.
Arizona were you?
I served in the Gilbert, Arizona mission right after it was created. It was one of those like new trial ones because I was part of that wave of new missionaries of the 19-year-olds.
Wow. Yeah, I lived in Mesa, grew up in Mesa,
Okay.
so I got
Yeah.
some roots there. Okay, so you said 24, 25. Well, I guess before we get into the faith transition part, how would you describe yourself now? I ask people, where do they currently fall on the LDS spectrum and even sometimes like belief spectrum? Like where are you at?
Yeah, I pin myself as a former member of the church. I would say that my belief in a being or God is very ambiguous right now. I don't really have a label to it, and finding my spirituality and honing into that intuition has been like a really beautiful process, and I don't really have a label for it at this time.
Yeah, perfect. All right, let's get into that faith transition bit. You said about 24, 25 is when that started to happen. So, where were you at the time? Like what was going on and what did that feel like?
Good question. It's a loaded question because there were quite a bit of things added to this shelf. I'm sure that you've heard people
Yeah, the
describe
shelf.
it. So I mean, there were things that I questioned as a teenager. There were things that kind of sit uncomfortably for me early on, but I did those things of just trying to continue to believe, telling myself and feeling the things that I felt like I needed to feel in order to continue with what I felt like was how I was going to live my life. As I got older, and I figured out who I was and what I stood for and the core values of myself, I started to feel like I was aligned with the teachings of the Savior, but not aligned with many of the folks who claimed to follow the Savior. I just continued to feel like I was living a incongruent life where I felt like I was trying to embody who Jesus was. The teachings, some of the teachings and some of the behaviors and the narratives around many of the cultural things were really difficult for me to swallow and to continue to keep moving forward actively. It felt for a long time like an identity crisis. I had no idea who I was because up until like I was really actually honoring my questioning and how I was feeling, I was suppressing and suppressing and suppressing until I no longer could anymore. Until it was like an actual crisis traumatic event that I no longer felt like I knew who I was because I had been suppressing my actual values to continue to move forward in the way that I thought was correct and right. And there's also something to be said that I'm sure everybody would agree with: the social pressure, the worries about what's being said. I was returned missionary, so I thought I knew what life meant, who I was, what it would look like, that internal dialogue.
Yeah.
And I had been through many hard things up until that point in my life. I had some traumatic things happen on my mission, and there had been some, things that were really difficult to get through. And I would say that this crisis, this traumatic event of identity, was probably among the top three hardest things I've ever had to deal with. And not only because of not knowing who I was, but then the fear for what would be reciprocated back to me from people that I loved who maybe wouldn't understand where I was coming from because of some of the narratives that just kind of like get discussed that, we've all been at fault for. I was at fault for, right? Like I had the same discussions, whether it was on my mission or before, of people who I loved who left and the assumptions that I made about them. And then to have then traded seats with those people and been there myself, realizing it was nothing like what I had assumed. That was probably the hardest part. I sat really uncomfortably for a very long time until I started to honor what I was actually feeling and then be able to start telling people this is where I'm at.
I think because of my personality and the way that I come across, I always find out about the exit when it's final. And like my like deepest desire, even if I didn't change that person's mind one bit, would be to have them come to me in the process, like while it's happening, or even like towards the beginning of it, and just like talk. I would love to just talk about things with my friends and family who have left. But it just seems like I only find out about stuff like when it's over. Were there any people that you did reach out to like at the beginning of this process, or was it kind of something that you carried on your own for a long time until like you hit your breaking point?
That's a great question. I sit in a very privileged spot where I had a handful of people in my world who I knew would be safe with this information, that I knew I could absolutely trust their response, and that I could trust them with this information, that it wouldn't just be like the gossip of the family or, how
Yeah.
sometimes that is. So I did. I had friends and family whom I was able to tell and say, this is what I'm experiencing, one of them being my dad. So I had many arms wrapped around me going through this, and not everybody, because I'm in this community now, not everybody has that. And so trying to be somebody for those folks who do end up in the questioning process where they actually leave or don't, I think starts with just being safe and open about it. Like I would tell people who I knew I could trust with the myriad of differences, whether it's things like there were some people who were still active, but we could have awesome conversations about political differences, or people who I knew just by at baseline were open and would see me for all that I am. Those were the people I was safe with. And I knew that. Anybody else, just because it's such a vulnerable time, there
Yeah.
wasn't a chance I was going to risk.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that is a huge point of wanting to be a person who could be trusted. In the way that I come across, I don't know that I would be a person that someone would think, oh, I could talk to her about that. Unless they were coming to me, the why I stay girl, to like help them stay, right? I'm not the, hey, let's have like a really open-hearted discussion. And that's why I'm here. This is what I'm trying to do now. But I'm like trying to rewrite this story. And so I'm grateful for your help. And that's an amazing insight. Thank you for that. The next question is, what was it like telling your family / spouse? So you finally got to this point where you decided like the shelf is broken, you're feeling this identity crisis. And so where was the point where you finally decided like, I can't continue on in this church anymore?
There wasn't a singular point for me. It was continuing to try and try and try, and then having to regress a little bit. Things like, okay, I no longer feel comfortable sitting through sacrament meeting, but maybe I can go to Relief Society. And then it gets to the point where, okay, Relief Society is now too difficult. Now I need to, I don't feel safe in Relief Society, so I need to step back from that, or then slowly asking to be released from callings. So it was a slow, until it was just like, all right, I need to be completely out in order to feel like authentic, even though I kept trying.
So you said not being able to sit through sacrament meeting and not feeling safe in Relief Society. Could you give me like a couple examples of
Yeah,
those things?
you bet. For example, for Relief Society, it would be comments from other people that would be completely incongruent with my values. And I knew where I sat and my values as a human being were not respected in that same room, then I no longer wanted to be there. And it's not necessarily that everybody felt that same way, but the continued discomfort of constantly feeling like we're hearing comments that don't align with how I feel about some things is uncomfy. And it got to a point where sacrificing my peace for that was no longer authentic.
And so is that what was happening? Sorry. Is that what was happening in sacrament meeting as well? Or was it different?
Similarly, sacrament meeting has its own set of baggage for me. Seeing the patriarchal hierarchy is really difficult for me. having to sit through that, like I probably stopped going to sacrament meeting first and just continued to go to like the classes to continue to learn about Jesus Christ and continue to learn about just like being a good human if maybe I didn't align with everything. So I would, just go to the classes rather than sit through sacrament meeting. And yeah, that's kind of how that trajectory went.
Thank you for that. So, speaking of attending church, question number 5 is, did anyone in your ward know what you were going through? And then what did they do or not do? And were you happy about that? Or what would you have preferred?
This is a good question. We were new to, so when this was happening, we had moved in between this phase of my life. So half of this, I would say half of the phase was in one ward, half of the phase was in a new ward. So in my old ward, and I had primarily been the one going to church in my relationship. So when I started to kind of not go, certainly people noticed, and I was also in Young Women's at the time. And so I would just go to Young Women's and I would let the leaders know I probably wouldn't be in sacrament meeting unless I felt like I should be there or support somebody talking or, anything like that. I was met with a little bit of pushback for that. And then we ended up moving shortly after, not related, just our house was up for sale and we moved. And in the new ward, they were pretty accepting of us and our dynamic. I still was trying to do the thing and go to the classes and would every once in a while go to sacrament meeting, maybe just like avoid testimony meeting and go when I felt like I was comfortable with that. And I did end up telling some of our leaders because we had like tithing settlement and it just got brought up, and inevitably you don't want to keep being asked the same questions, so it's just kind of nice to get that over with. And I was asked to then be a ward missionary, which I accepted just because that's what you do and you just accept callings. And I was still stressed about how to navigate that. And I felt like that was rather a means of trying to pull me back in. And I think that pushed me further because that made me do things I was uncomfortable with, but I wanted to be supportive. I wanted to do the right thing because I was still of that mindset that you just accept callings because that's just what you do until then I had been asked to be released because I didn't feel comfortable and I wasn't getting released. And so I just had to make a big, brave move for me, somebody who's quite a people pleaser. And also in this really tough situation, I just had to end up stop going to the meetings just for myself, because over time you start to learn how valuable your peace is because there's so much discomfort in so many aspects of your life that I just started to try and find places where I could protect that peace. And not participating in my calling was the only way I could do that, since I wasn't being validated by being released for myself. But then there were other people in the neighborhood who were very supportive and didn't say anything about my lack of church attendance. And those are the people that I embodied and felt the safest with the most, because I knew I was more than just a member to them. And then there were other folks who that's the only reason they would come over, was to try and get me and my spouse to church. And that's probably going to happen anywhere.
Okay, so that is a lot, and I thank you for sharing all of that and being so open about it. So I have three things in my mind that I want to try and get back to and ask a little bit of clarification. One, what can I ask what the pushback was? You said when you told the people you were serving with in Young Women's that you would probably only be coming to Young Women's but not to the sacrament meeting. What was the pushback that you received from them?
It was something along the lines of just like not being able to have like the full, like the spirit going into Young Women. So if I had to teach, like it was important to go to the first hour to make sure that like being obedient, there was an obedience narrative with it, that's how we're going to be able to serve these young women the best, is if we're obeying the best. So that was kind of the narrative that I got when I discussed that.
Perfect. Thank you. And then you mentioned that your husband was not attending at the time before you moved. Do you feel like that also contributed to your exit as well? Or do you feel like that those things are separate?
Those things are very, very separate. He did go for a while for me because I was the one that was all in, and he would go for me until he would work on Sundays. And I don't want to ever speak for him, but I think that he would agree with me by saying it was never something he was like all in for. And so, he for a while, just said that he believed the things, but just he genuinely just didn't enjoy going to church. So we still kind of believed all the things at home, and I was just the one that was at church on Sundays.
Yeah. This is something that is so difficult to navigate. So being a ward missionary or them trying to pull you in, and then also having neighbors, like some of them who don't bring anything about church versus those who like seem to only come and like that's their only motive. I'm in the Relief Society presidency right now. We've had so many discussions about like how and I know it's probably different for everybody, but what would make you feel or help you feel like I was coming to visit you because I cared about you? Because honestly, like, of course I would be thrilled if you came back to church. Like, I'd be so happy to have you there. Like, I can't not say that because that's true for me. But also, I want you to know that you're loved and that you're welcome in our neighborhood. And if you ever wanted to pop in to a girls' night or to an activity or whatever, you're welcome. Your status of coming to church doesn't matter. So for you, what would help you feel that that's my overarching, like, reason for coming to visit? Does that make sense?
It does. I would say the synchrony of those behaviors would be what would have made the difference, for me at least. Where if I had felt like I was being genuinely asked questions about who I was in while I was active, and then that continued, I wouldn't feel like I was being targeted. Where it's like rather overwhelming after exiting or attendance dropping or things, and then the visits start to ramp up. Nobody, I think, would not be able to connect those dots, that not necessarily that there's even a negative agenda at play here, but I think everybody who's been active can say that you want to bring in the fold, and maybe just recognizing that we're not lost is a good place to start.
I know everyone's experience is different, but just on an honest question of like, where are you at and what kind of interaction do you want to have? Would that be overstepping bounds?
Never. That would have actually been super helpful. Because I will say, and again, I don't want to speak for everybody, but I think I can for many people, where because we were active and because we did all the things, we know the narratives. We know when we're stepping away that it is lost, that there's some red flags, that our names are popping up in meetings, and things like that. What we get to nervous about is what's being said about us, what's being assumed about us, that we're just lazy, that we're all the things. So having a leader come to us and say, hey, I love you, I notice that you're not going anymore, how can I support you, where are you at, do you want to share with me your experience? Anything like that, to just be upfront. I want to support you. Do you want to continue contact? Is it okay if I still contact you? Having it clear rather than ambiguous bombarding at random times. I think that there would be great acceptance from many people.
Okay. I think that is just something that we all struggle with. Well, I'm probably more upfront than the average Joe.
I think that's great.
But I think that is still something that people struggle with, is like, I can't just go and say those things, but I wonder if we just practice. It might take a while, but we need to practice these things. Because from you, what I'm getting is that boundaries are really important, and that respect and honoring your decision is really important. And I don't know that we could do that or even know that without having me sit down and talk to you about this. If you had moved into my ward and were coming for a couple weeks and then stopped coming, I don't have enough context, right? And so it's just about being able to have those difficult conversations. Thank you for that insight.
You're welcome.
So I guess we kind of got into the negative experiences with family or friends or ward members. Are there any other ones that you could share that could help me learn from what happened? People reaching out or not reaching out, or harmful words or things like that?
I would say that the things that were the most harmful in general were actually things said over the pulpit, whether it was in church, whether it was in Relief Society, or whether it was in general conference. It is the generalizations of people like me who are questioning, who do decide to make a full exit. And these phrases that are used, such as lazy learner, or lost sheep, or apostate, or don't take counsel from non-believers, like we weren't there before, or these overarching generalizations are really harmful to a lot of us, because we have just exited every identity point, we no longer know who we are. And we're trying to pick up those pieces and the narratives that come with that, the assumptions that come with that over the pulpit and the generalizations, I think were the most harmful, and what made it easier for me to no longer go to church actively is because I would continue to hear those. And while even sometimes I still wanted to be there, I couldn't get myself to do it because I couldn't hear one more negative thing about somebody who might be in the same boat as I.
I just want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry that happened and that it was so painful. I mean, I'm sure I've said things like that, but I didn't know.
Right. And I would hope that former members such as I give enough grace to those who genuinely don't know, because we were there too, and we made those same generalizations, and I think everybody deserves grace on both sides.
That's what I'm finding, at least from those who have like reached out and wanted to be a part of these conversations. Because of the path that you've traveled, you are overflowing with grace and understanding, and like are very gentle with your words and like the way that you approach things and phrase things. So I really appreciate that aspect of your interactions with me, at least here and now. So thank you for that.
You bet.
Last question before we get to your hope statement. Were there any positive experiences with friends, family, or ward members that you'd like to share that we could try and emulate?
Yeah, I kind of touched on a few. I would say that just in general, the most positive experiences that I would say that I've had or did have at that time that I would point as the safest also is what I would correlate positive with at this period
Okay.
of would be the people who didn't treat me any different. The people who, and the other, I've seen many people whom I love go through a similar experience to mine and have family not treat them the way that my family was really wonderful to me, those who were active at the time. And people I loved didn't have the same experience from their immediate family. And so, again, like I'm very grateful for the people who chose to love me beyond my beliefs, that they chose to see who I am, that I try to be good to my core, and that while this ideology may no longer be the core part of my identity, that those things that I believed and stood for as Tori, a member of the church, are still those things that I stand for, just maybe with a different motive. And those people who didn't treat me any different were the people who were in my circle the very safest and who I kept around. Because there comes a point where you do have to just say, again, with protecting your peace, there's a lot of baggage that comes with this, and you have to be around people who you know will respect. But also, I learned that, especially with friends, the people who loved me to my core, it may be sad to them because it's something that they love, right? And I can understand that because I was there. But that didn't change them inviting me to places or going to do things, or and it even got more respectful where they would say, "Hey, we're having a game night, but this is a topic that's coming up in the church recently that we might talk about. So just letting you know that this is, might come up." But just this respectful nature of knowing that I'm loved and all that I am, regardless of the belief system or the religion that I choose to embody behind that.
Beautiful. I think that's something I can do. I think that's something that I can work on.
We can all work on that in plenty of aspects of our lives, right?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. All right, Tori, this is the last piece that I love doing. This is how the question goes. Make a hope statement. What do you hope for most in the relationships between members and former members?
The thing that I hope the very most is, and this is retrospectively, is that active members maybe will take a few steps back to their loved ones. I think that there is a visceral reaction to somebody leaving, and that's real. And I would hope that maybe it becomes more intuitive to take a few steps back, whether it's their loved ones or strangers, and genuinely invite them to their table, ask them their story, listen for understanding and listen out of love rather than trying to bring them back to the fold or continue to tell them that you're praying for them or things like that. And in conjunction with this, my favorite parable was and has always been the parable of the wheat and the tares. And as an active member, I felt very strongly about that parable because I grew up in a family and in a home that valued diversity and valued differences. And so it's a core value of mine to grow together. And so having been on this side of it, this is still something that's valuable to me. It's just that the harvest maybe isn't necessarily for everybody, when Christ comes. And the tares are not necessarily the bad people of the world, but maybe just the people who believe differently than you. But I think if we step back and look at the goal as our hope being that we grow together until the harvest, whatever that looks like on an individual level, that's when the earth can embody beauty.
That is incredible. I really love that perspective. Thank you so much, Tori, for being here, being open, being willing, and being an impact for good through this medium. I'm grateful to have you be part of our Listen In family. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks again for holding space for us.
I loved Tori's idea of letting the wheat and tares grow together. We can both be of totally different stock. We can have totally different stalks, STALKS. We can have different stalks and grow together still. We're not the ones who are going to be taking the wheats from the tares. That's the Lord's job. That's up to him. Our job is to grow up strong and also grow together with those around us. So how can we do that better? How can we do that in more of a Christ-like way? And how can we use and seek for the gift of discernment to better be able to love and serve and truly connect with the people around us? From my point of view, what I got from this episode is utilizing discernment. As members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we believe in the gift of discernment, which is being able to use the Holy Ghost to see past what's going on the outside and see into people's hearts, or to discern their good qualities, or to recognize a situation. I think we as Latter-day Saints could strive for the gift of discernment in knowing how to approach those in our ward, not just people who are outwardly not attending church, like our friend Tori here, because a lot of times we don't know who's struggling. They still are showing up to church. They're still doing their callings. They're still doing all the things. And in the quiet heart is hidden sorrows that the eyes can't see. Our eyes can't see it, but God sees it. And if we can strive for the spirit of discernment, we will be able to see it spiritually for people. And not to say that we're making assumptions or anything, but to really try and be kind and careful and delicate in the way that we approach the members of our ward, because we just really never know what they're going through. And I'd like to invite you, if you are a member of the Church of Jesus Christ and you are wondering how to have these conversations, I'd love to invite you to look down below and click the link to get my guide to my list of 5 questions to ask your loved one who has left the Church of Jesus Christ. And sometimes we just need to know where to begin. So I've got some tips about approaching others that I've learned from these wonderful interviews that I'm doing, and you can find that as a free resource down below in the description. So click that link and grab that resource if it would be helpful to you. And I invite you to be along with me on this journey. Reach out to somebody. Will you? Will you just reach out to somebody? Don't stress. God will make it right if you don't say all the right things, and it's just a learning experience. Try your best and let God do the rest. All right, guys, love you so much. I'm glad that you've been here with us on this Listen In episode. If it meant anything to you, would you please subscribe to the YouTube channel and share this episode? Thank you for doing that. All right, guys, we'll see you next week for another Listen In episode. Thank you for listening in with us.